Yeah, could we hop into a little more of the computer programming side of things? Because when you and I caught up for coffee, you said something along the lines of how the limits of logic need to be better understood, and you were talking about how computer languages or inputs of data kind of represent that.
Yes, all right. Well, look, let's take the Julie Andrews approach here, which is
The actor.
to start. Yeah, the actor. Well,
Yeah, the actress singer.
back in my
Actress singer.
Yeah, well, the Julie Andrews approach to life is.
Wait, didn't we have this conversation as
I
well?
don't know. It's to start at the very beginning.
A very good place to
That's
start. Yes,
that's correct.
I was going to be just give it your all.
Yeah. So look. Anyway, here's the the business. Computer programming is very interesting. Is that the I noticed you were looking at my business card, and you saw the sort of magic 3 letters at the end of my name, PhD. Now, which is in Australia is the kind of entry qualification into a professional academic career. And I'm glad to say that my PhD in computer science was actually legitimately something you could describe as philosophy.
Right.
Okay, because if you do a PhD, I don't know, in just about anything, you become a deep expert in it. But the thing is that computer programming is not just philosophical, but metaphysical. You would say, is that someone who writes a significant computer program is celebrating up there with Aristotle and Aquinas. So.
High praise.
No, it's a modest claim, but you just have to let reality assert itself. So, my PhD was about designing computer languages. This was a very 60s, 70s PhD topic. Invent your own programming language. It's just crank the handle and out comes a PhD, a piece of cake. I wish it was, but nevertheless, that's the way to. That was what a lot of people did.
Are we able to find your paper online as well?
Sorry, Sam just asked.
Yeah, so I'll be able to find my work. My PhD is probably not, that predates it, but I have two copies at home.
They'll be on a scroll somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
what is computer language as
Okay, well,
as
when you write a program,
Yep.
Eventually there's the instructions the machine follows, but the instructions that are interpreted by the electronics are not necessarily express the right concepts that the human brain does.
Yep.
And so the question is that when you're defining a computation, what are the right sort of terms in which to define a computation? What are the sort of things that shape your mind? And so this is why I say metaphysical, because when Aristotle was trying to say, how do we understand the world and what's in it? Well, we've things got to act and potential, and then there are the 4 ends and all that sort of stuff, and these are the things that they are and how they relate. When you're deciding how to frame what a computation looks like, this is what you have to decide. This is what people do when they design programming languages. You're establishing a framework for thinking about computation, and that's metaphysical. Then when Joe or Jane programmer get to work writing a big program, you often find that then the quality programming languages will allow people to actually define their own or extend the framework that comes with the language, and not just sort of define a piece of computation, but define abstractions that are relevant to the way they're thinking, that actually let them frame their own computation. So, in other words, a good programming language is one that lets you extend it with new elements of the conceptual framework.
Right.
And so Joe or Jane programmer are actually, once they use these, what I'll call meta-programming capabilities that a good programming language has, are actually also engaging in metaphysics. So yes, I can confidently say that anyone who's really had sort of personal responsibility for building a large piece of software has probably conducted an intellectual exercise that is at least as thorough as the thinking that goes on behind most PhDs. This is a hypothesis. In what field? Any field. In some sense, less exacting, in some sense, more exacting. Less exacting in the sense that, a PhD's got to be well documented. You have to expose your thought processes in the thesis, which sadly in computer software, the thought processes that led to produce 10,000, 20,000 lines of code often don't get explained. But more exacting in the way that the software's got to run. So, the software can be thought of as theory about what outputs it's supposed to produce if there's some inputs. And you actually got to test it and show it to the customer that it's actually doing what it's supposed to. And if you've made a mistake, then the mistake can be revealed by
the fact that it doesn't work.
Or does or doesn't, by observation. You
Right.
put these inputs, you get these outputs. And if it's producing the right outputs for those inputs and you've tested it, exposed it to a large enough number of test cases, then people can reasonably have some confidence that it's accurate. It's a bit like how science works, is that, once again, Newton's laws of gravitation make some predictions about where the planets are going to be next year based upon where they are now and their observed motions. And by and large, it's pretty good. Einstein's general theory of relativity actually improves upon Newton's stuff, but for a lot of intents and purposes, Newton's is close enough. Likewise, a software system, things tend to be a little bit more yes or no. It either paid you the right amount of money or didn't.
Right.
It's the autopilot landed the plane or it didn't. Things like that.
So philosophy and logic tends to have somewhat of a binary kind of
Yes, it
alternative.
does.
Yeah.
It does. So anyway, there's where the logic and philosophy comes into computer programming. The thing is, though, is that logic is fundamentally limited. The famous mathematician, logician, or we could call him philosopher, Kurt Gödel, was flourishing in the early part of the 20th century. And back in the late 19th, early 20th century, a bunch of mathematicians, Germans as it would inevitably have been, thinking that things get really tidy if we could actually formalise everything in mathematics. So they'd formalised arithmetic, but let's formalise logic. Let's have logic decide what logic looks like. And Gödel went away and thought it, and he basically came with a surprising result that if you have a system powerful enough to describe itself, then there are going to be things that you can't prove about it that are true or false. And given that the whole point of logic is deciding whether or not things are true or false, if there are going to be things in your system that are true but can't prove to be true, then that seems to be inadequate. So we either have logic that can't be defined logically, or if we can define logic fully logically, then we're not going to be able to prove everything we want to prove. Now, let's get concrete about this. Okay, here it is that the real problem is that when you have a system of describing things that's powerful enough to describe itself, you come up with logical paradoxes. Now, the classical one was introduced by the British philosopher Bertrand Russell, or Lord Russell, as I think he inherited the title. And Russell's, he was basically originally a logician, a mathematician, and he said, when I wasn't smart enough to do maths, I became a philosopher, and then when I wasn't smart enough to be a philosopher, I became a politician. Russell's paradox is there's a village, okay? In the village, there's the village barber. The village barber shaves everyone who doesn't shave himself. And then your question is, who shaves the barber? Well, if the barber shaves himself, well, then he doesn't shave himself because he shaves everyone who doesn't shave themselves. Now, if your head is spinning, then it's even more simply posed in the English language. Okay, so the English language has adjectives that describe things. Big, little, tall, short, smart, ugly, pretty, etc. Well, one of the things that the English language has are adjectives that describe other adjectives. So adjectives that describe adjectives. This is getting a bit, self-referential. This is where your spine starts to tingle.
Could we what would be
an example? Okay.
An example of that.
Well, there's one adjective. We only need to deal with two. There are these words in English, autological and heterological. Okay? An adjective is autological if it describes itself and heterological if it doesn't. So, for example, let's get concrete. Short is autological because short is a short word. Okay?
Right.
Long is heterological
Doesn't describe
because
itself.
it's not a long word.
Yeah.
Sesquipedalian is
I love that one.
autological.
What does that mean?
It means long, but it's a long word.
Yeah.
Okay, got the idea?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so autological and heterological are words that describe adjectives. An adjective can either be autological or heterological, or maybe inapplicable. Is autological autological? Okay, well, does it describe itself? Does it? Well, if it does, it's autological. So I guess it is.
Yeah.
Right. What about heterological? Does heterological describe itself? Oh, no. So it's, if heterological doesn't
Autological.
describe
It's
itself,
autological.
no, if heterological doesn't describe itself, it must be heterological. So, but if heterological's heterological, it must be autological. But this actually exposes the fundamental problem in systems of definition that are capable of self-description. You run into these amusing paradoxes. They're kind of funny, but they represent a gap in just what the logic can express. I might add a sidebar here, is that there's a very amusing piece of legislation in many, Anglosphere jurisdictions, the Acts Interpretation Act. And I think in Queensland, the Acts Interpretation Act includes a clause that says the interpretation of the Acts Interpretation Act is subject to this Act. I'm sure in the hands of a clever lawyer who's done the trivium and quadrivium, that the self-contradictions could maybe, get you off any sort of, if you wanted to be found not guilty of any number of heinous crimes, then exploring the consequences of the self-referentiality of the Acts Interpretation Act could be a profitable way to make your mark. Not that I'm listeners, not that listeners don't do this at home.
Yeah.
That's right. Be good. That's right. Ignore the Acts Interpretation Act. Interpret it exactly as it's meant to be. Yeah. So that's where logic has its limits, and it's a it even has theological implications. The whole scholastic branch of theology seems designed to make theology subject to logic, which some people are impressed by it, but I think it's got to be thought of as being icing on the cake, for the sort of person with traditional Christian beliefs, is that first 1,000 years of Christianity, we got by without the marriage of Aristotle and the Christian religion. So I don't think Jesus really had too much to say about Aristotle. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
But because I'm wondering how this ties into the definition of things, because someone like Aristotle, who came up with, we give things definitions based on their utility and characteristics, and that's how something gets its definition, and then you have
just like when you're defining a computer language, exactly. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then
Ari, we would have I hope he's gone to heaven, because then I'm looking forward to spending eternity having a
doing podcasts.
Doing podcasts.
Chit chat.
But and then you have some. Now I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name, but Kantian ideology, where we give the conception of an idea. What's the word? It is preconceived before the thing that we're thinking about. So we give something a definition based on our own perception of that thing that we have in our head. So, like for example, a table's a table. What's a table? A table is something that you put things on. You can also put things on a chair, but a chair, by its utility and its characteristic, isn't a table, even though you could use it to put something on. But in the Kantian way, I'm going to call it
this
Kantian.
is good. No, I'm following. Yeah, that's good.
And then the Kantian way of thinking is more or less of, well, maybe a chair is a table to someone else whose idea of a table is a chair, because the idea, I guess, it's prior to the actual definition of the thing. And I'm wondering, because in a world like today, it seems like we are leaning towards maybe certain curriculums as well, a Kantian idea or ideology where things are up to the personal interpretation.
I don't think so. I mean, things are things. Okay. And without being a Kantian, though, one thing is that I don't quite understand about the Aristotelian point of view, is that a table's a table because I want it to be. When I made it having a table in mind. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if I make something that has a flat surface and is sort of lower on the floor, it could be both a table and a chair. The fact, I when I made it, I thought it was a table, but I was saying, well, actually, you can use it for something else. A thing is what it is, and there's still, it seems, even in the Aristotelian point of view, there's what is for me an uncomfortable sense of, it's all not so much in the eye of the beholder, but in the eye of the maker. When I made it, I thought it was going to be a table, so it's a table. It's a chair too. No, I didn't make it to be a chair. I made this and it's a table. Mm-hmm. And sort of Kant is saying, well, look, I can call whatever I like. It's a table for me or a chair for me. But, I mean, you can't call things that aren't tables. I mean, this is where eventually the kind of, what I understand you're saying the Kantian view goes, is that, saying, well, this is my truth. Mm. But, there's got to be some kind of objectivity about it all. And the thing why I'm sort of having a dig at least what's claimed to be Aristotle's worldview, we'll call it Aristotelian without necessarily blaming him for it, is, the way it seems to be expressed is there's still an element of subjectivity in it. Is that, when I made it, I intended it to be a table. And, well, if it just happens to be equally usable as a chair, then you need to be a slave to the objective truth. So this is once again goes back to the epiphany I had studying geometry, is that your opinion about something really shouldn't matter. I mean, things are what they are, or not. Those two angles, they're the same. You mightn't want them to be, but they're the same. That artifact I made, you thought it was a table, but it's equally useful as a chair. And I'm going to use it as a chair, and I'm going to say it's a chair. So this is, I think, potentially controversial. And I'm honestly trying to... I'm reading a a guy called Edward Feser, who's prominent on the interwebs. His introduction to scholastic metaphysics to try and get a grip on these subtle distinctions and see whether or not my slave to objectivity criterion is adequately met or not. You know, maybe even I have to change my mind. That's happened once or twice before. Not because I'm right, it's just because I'm stubborn. But you see where I'm coming from. Is that this idea that your opinion of something is what matters. It'd be nice to have that completely purged, and things are just what they objectively are.
Well, it's like having an argument with someone and you hit someone with logic and they come back with "I feel."
Yeah,
it's like, well, you can feel one way doesn't necessarily mean you're right.
And once again, is that this is just the last thing I read out of this introduction to scholastic metaphysics was the idea that it looks like a hammock, but it grew naturally in the forest, and I didn't make it as a hammock, so I can't call it a hammock. And I think, well, actually, that's really, almost a little about, what I think it is. It's not a hammock for me. So, but this is because I think, Aristotle's got these four ends, for the causes. Mm. And the final cause of this is a hammock. I intended it to be a hammock, and it's a hammock because, among other things, I intend it to be a hammock. It seems to be, and, I'm sorry for the educated reader that I'm exposing my ignorance, but hey, I didn't have the advantage of a Greek classical education. I was made to science. Mm-hmm. The idea that something could be a hammock just because it is and not because you intend it to be is a key sort of burning issue in my mind that I want to get resolved by improving my understanding of Aristotle, Thomist philosophy.
Thomist. Things of which can describe themselves or give themselves definitions, and like we're talking about human kind of rationality as well, but I'm wondering, to take a computer language approach, it's interesting because it seems like AI is progressing at such a stage where it is almost a bit able to self-describe. Particularly, it was interesting that you were talking about creating computer programs that are equivalent to, PhD studies, in your humble opinion. Humble opinion, of course. And yet, I think the latest AI that China just released, that it passed every single PhD level exam that Harvard and Yale combined had to offer. And it seems that we're getting towards this stage where something like AI can almost be self-efficient, and I'm wondering, what does that really look like for computer programs? If a computer programmer is looking to AI to create itself, for the computer program to input the thing that the thing is already created for itself.
Well, look, I mean, maybe, that's pretty complex, but take a step back. I guess the whole question, of course, is burning interest of mine is that how much of computer programming can be done by AI? Mm. And then what do you mean by computer programming? I mean, one of the key things with AI is asking the right question. And so, a big deal in software development has been the sort of distinction between a mathematical specification or any other specification versus the implementation. So, what's a simple one? We can specify what square root is. The square root of x is y, such that y times y equals x. Okay, so we know what square root means, but that's not an effective algorithm. To actually make that into an effective algorithm, you've got to really think about the nature of square root and produce a lot of other a lot of code that will actually calculate square roots.
Mm-hmm.
There's a method called the Newton-Raphson method, where to find the square root of something, take x on half x, okay, and then you divide x by half of x. Then you take the average of those result between x on 2 and the first result, and you keep taking the averages, and it eventually converges towards the square root. But that's not immediately obvious from the specification. Now, the AI would know that for a whole lot of reasons. One, because the AI, the world is full of discussions of square roots.
Right.
But, you know, if you come up with an absolutely novel mathematical specification for something complicated, or even a requirement in natural language, then the AI is going to have to go and find, where the terms in the requirement or the specification have been used and how they translate into executable code. So, in the first instance, I think AI would at least enable the focus in software development to go towards sort of the user requirements end rather than the coding end. I mean, if coding became an obsolete art, that would be kind of good, because one of the, and this is not just a finesse answer, we've happened upon this important point by accident, I guess, but one of the big bugbears in the world of software is not getting the requirements right before people start the coding. So if AI would allow us to kind of forget about coding and focus more upon negotiating requirements between the clients and the implementers, that would be a big step up. More generally about AI, about technology, is that it's interesting that it's not new. Is that once upon a time smart people could do arithmetic, and that was one of the definitions of a smart person. Well, that disappeared 50 years ago. Was that arithmetic became a mechanical skill with the ubiquity of electronic calculators. I remember when electronic calculators came in, we were big at school in 1973.
Oh, that's pretty recent.
Pretty
That's
recent,
right.
yeah. No, battery calculators, the naughty boys used to type in numbers and turn them upside down. They'd say...
Yeah.
That old chestnut.
Yeah. So the...
Guilty.
It was a boys' school. Yeah. But that's as far as it goes, listeners. There's it's strictly G-rated from here on. So used to people who were numerate. You could add up. My grandfather was an accountant, and he'd be balancing books late at night when I was a small child and things. I don't think he used a mechanical calculator. He was a smart man because he could add up and multiply and things. Well, nowadays people who can do computer coding are smart, but that's the next thing that could be. Looks like it's in the firing line from AI, etc., etc. I guess we're really going to be forced to have an understanding of just what things humans can do that machines can't. From a sort of philosophical point of view, finding the value in human beings, other than for the mechanical tasks, physically mechanical or intellectually mechanical tasks that they can perform, would be, I think, a good realisation. I mean, it's good to be, an Audrian in some sense.
Sorry, what's an Audrian?
Well, W.H. Audrey was one of England's greatest philosophers. Okay, he wrote the Railway series. He is the creator of Thomas the Tank Engine.
Aha.
And, the summit of virtue in the W.H. Audrey world was to be a really useful engine. So he was definitely a utilitarian. If you're a useful engine, you're a good engine. Now, I think we have to move beyond the W.H. Audrey world, is that, people have a value outside of their being useful. But, what is that value? I mean, who knows? Maybe the machines will do everything for us, and we can just, all become some kind of, it sounds like hippie community, but no, we can just all sort of, love each other. I mean, so in a pure and spiritual way, but you know what I mean, is that, we just have a world of where people practice niceness. We don't have to worry where our next meal's coming from. Well, no, that's never going to happen. But yeah, well, I mean, they're always going to be bad people. So I mean, how bad people make our lives a misery under the new regime remains to be seen. As I was saying to somebody else just this morning, I forget how the conversation arose, but someone was saying to me that, at the school we went to when I was a child, the nuns said they didn't believe in original sin. And I said, well, that's silly. I mean, of all the elements of sort of classical Christian doctrine, original sin's got to be the easiest to believe in. I mean, if you look at philosophical prospects about, all the angels might be different species, well, that's hard to tell because we can't observe it. But you can certainly observe original sin every day. You just have to deal with people being mean and nasty.
Can I ask what the original sin is?
It's Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve,
righto.
okay, Adam and Eve sinned, and so we've inherited that character defect from Adam and Eve, which is a way of putting it. And so everybody has got flaws in their makeup, and we are inclined to selfishness. Let's put it that way. And, well, that's got to be true. We certainly know that everyone's desperately inclined to selfishness. So if there was such a thing called original sin, the world will look exactly like it does today. So that's kind of a piece of sort of scientific theology where the theological proposition is certainly consistent with day-to-day observation. So the AI world, who knows? There's going to be some kind of, who knows what kind of bad things are going to happen. I mean, the idea of rule by robots might be enough to cause us misery. What was the movie again with Thingo?
iRobots with...
No, the other one with, where everyone was plugged into... Matrix, yeah, the Matrix, yeah,
course,
the Matrix, yeah, the Matrix, something like that.
Thank you, Sam.
So it'll be interesting to see just, how people get to practice virtue and deal with or combat vice under the new regime where we, supposedly won't have to work for a living.
Well, yeah, but and what separates humans from something like AI obviously is human nature. And I guess the Jordan Peterson approach would be along the lines of, AI may take more or it might take more jobs away from us or it might, free up time for us. But human nature always finds a way to find a problem as well.
Yeah, well, it depends who's in charge of things. I mean, here is my anxiety about the future of society, is that, hitherto, the people in charge have been at the top of a big pyramid of underlings like us. But we've been needed to produce the things that the people in charge need. Okay, but now they're going to have robots and AI, and all we are is just a threat to them. Okay, is that, we could wake up and say, hang on, is that we're making you rich, aren't we? Yes. But then you don't need us anymore. No. So what are you going to do with us? Nothing. Now, this sounds a bit sort of crazy, but, the thing is that, let's sort of get edgy now, is that if I was rich and powerful and had control of machines and AI, I'd be promoting population reduction.
Why?
Because people like you and I are not relevant to the happiness of the people in charge.
Right, we don't provide or...
we hitherto, they've needed people like you and me to, empty bedpans, dig in the fields, drive buses,
You still got to eat.
write computer software.
Yep.
But in future, the robots and the AI will do all that.
What is AI? I think we throw AI around a lot, but no one really understands what AI is. It like, for example, actually, I had an experience with AI last week, believe it or not. I had to get a license for something, which I won't say what it was, or else they might take it off me. And there was about a 6-hour test at the end of it.
I want to know what license we can't talk about.
I'll tell you off camera.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was one of these classic tests online through the government where you got all these modules you got to run through, do a test at the end of them, and then at the end you've got 3 hours to complete a final test on all the modules. I didn't have this time to do it, and I was on a time crunch because, to be honest, I was lazy. I just didn't do it. And I found that ChatGPT, if I just copy and pasted all the questions directly into ChatGPT, it spat the answers back out to me within 10 seconds. And I finished this 6-hour test so quickly that I thought I shouldn't submit this yet in 30 minutes because it might seem really odd. So I went outside, I played golf for a bit, came back and submitted it 4 hours later.
So that's why you can't tell us what license
Yeah.
it's for.
I'm still waiting on that to come in the mail. So.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's no doubting that the scope of stuff that AI can deal with now is, staggering. But in a sense, once again, is that, let's think about the continuity. Once upon a time, a machine that could multiply 4-digit numbers would have just left people agog. Okay, so, you now hear about people talking about, sometimes it's been used, anything where a computer does some decision-making has been called, oh, that's the AI. So, there is a completely new degree of intelligence.
I guess it'll always
Think
change,
process.
won't it?
But the idea that machines have been taking over things that look to be intellectually marvellous is something that's been going on for quite a while now. I mean, and not just since the advent of electronic computers, adding machines have been taking away smart people's work for over a century.
The impact of the printing press.
Even that.
Yeah.
Even the printing, good thought, printing press. What? You can make books. You don't need monks to laboriously copy out the text. You can just crank them out. Wow. So all sorts of things that we would have thought as to being, apotheosis of intellect.
They were all technically AI in their own way.
Well, I mean,
at
in a sense, it's been looking like that to us, depending on what you call intelligence. Just being able to write, that was a major intellectual feat. So, but getting back to computer programming, I'm glad to say I've seen a table. I've got to get this off my chest. I saw a table. I saw a table of jobs most under threat by AI, ranked from most under threat at the top to least under threat at the bottom. And you could draw a line across the middle of it. The jobs above the line or below the line involve touching people. Physiotherapist,
Right.
dentist.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Above the line was not touching people. So
Accountants.
accountants.
Lawyers.
Yep. So below the line, people are going to really not want a robot doing surgery. On the other hand, maybe you do. Is that at some stage, do you want some guy with trembling fingers to do the brain surgery? Maybe I'd rather have a robot do my do fillings, not me, because I happen to be related to one of Australia's top dentists. Yeah. Oh, she's fantastic, and so is her husband and father-in-law. They are wonderful. But, the rest of you who don't have access, you've got Dr. Urbacher, I suppose. You could go to him. But not everyone has got real top dentists, and you might say, I might prefer a robot to do that. But nevertheless, at the moment, for the purpose of this table, touching people, less threat, not touching people, more threat. It was quite surprising, some of the jobs they thought were under threat, like architects and engineers and solicitors, because a lot of the work that are done by these otherwise creative people, a lot of the work is essentially just following professional discipline. If an engineer says, look, could you build me a bridge that's 4 lanes wide and carries this many cars and has to be this high over the river, there are standards that people apply in engineering. When you're doing conveyancing, there are standards. Even in architecture, Not everything's the Sydney Opera House. I want a 4-bedroom house with 2 bars, a garage facing north, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, this is what we do. And you can apply standards. The non-touching people job that was least at risk was computer programming, because we really don't know how to program computers. It's all pretty chaotic.
That was actually Sam's question. He wanted to know if computer programming is in threat of being obsolete.
Well, coding is that the translating the requirement into computer language code, but articulating the requirement is actually a black art at the moment. It's something that's not widely practiced. People have been advocating something called agile programming, which has been going around for about 20 years, where you don't ask the customer what they want. You get an idea, you write some code, and then you say, is that what you wanted? And they say yes or no, and you write some more code, and you kind of, without having an explicit statement of requirement, you just code like mad. And there are people who think that's definitely the way to go, but I don't think so. As I spend my retirement working on my own software development project, is that it's pretty obvious that having a statement of what you want, not expressed at source code level, but in fairly specific technical language, English language, is absolutely critical. I probably should be using mathematics, but a statement of the solution at a higher level than the computer code, a higher level of abstraction that talks about what you want out of it rather than how it does. The what-how distinction is fundamental, is absolutely essential. And how we actually specify the what we want a piece of software to do in the world of AI is going to be very interesting, because there aren't those many specifications around, or adequate specifications of what as it's distinct from how. So how the AI is going to learn remains to be seen. Now, once again, don't take me as some kind of expert, because I've got about as much knowledge of AI as anyone who's had a go at ChatGPT. I would like to see how. Well, I've got some ideas about how, very good ideas about how I'm going to use AI as part of the project I'm working on. But as far as implementing the project itself, I wish I could see into that crystal ball.
Well, when you log into some websites and it pulls up like 9 images and it select the bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I found out recently that's also AI. That's not actually testing you really as like a what would you call it, a security purpose, to make sure you're not a robot. It's you're teaching the system to be able to recognise what's a bike, what's not a bike, and that's being inputted into their memory.
Who told you this?
I don't know, probably YouTube somewhere, but
Well,
it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, how much has anyone started Severance yet?
No, I haven't.
No, oh my word.
Up to date.
Sam's up to date with Severance. Prof, you would love this TV show. Anyway, there's this plug for Severance, but it's this really interesting concept where essentially you can undergo this procedure where it severs your brain. They put a chip in you and it severs your brain, so you've got two, I guess, states of being. There's the version of you that's at work, and then there's the version of you that's at home that never works. And it's the same person, but as soon as person goes into work, his brain transitions into the other person. So you have this concept where the person at work never leaves work, and the person at home never goes to work.
Sign me up.
Well, he goes when he walks through the door, he switches.
Well, yeah.
You don't have any recollection.
I mean, zero recollection.
Yeah, right.
Zero recollection. So there are a bunch of moral dilemmas that arise when you think about that, because it's like, if the person on the outside world is a virtuous and good person, is he culpable for the mistakes and the wrongdoings of the person at work if he's an absolute
No.
but it raises those so anyway, their jobs on the inside is they essentially that's really interesting you say that, because their job on the inside, they actually don't know the work that they're doing, and they get a feeling for they have this computer and they just have to highlight and put the scary numbers into a trash can. And they don't know why they're doing it, but they just get a feeling for the scary numbers. And anyway, it turns out, or this could be my, I think, no. Anyway, without spoiling it, the idea is that this company called Lumen is getting them to perform stuff and teach the software things about things that otherwise, if they were to obviously do it, they wouldn't be doing it, if that makes sense. So it's funny. It's like, how much are we actually teaching AI without knowing that we're teaching it ourselves? And that'd be a lot.
Well, yes, you never know. Is that they might say, look, the airline puts you in an uncomfortable seat, and how do you react, and that sort of thing. So, spot this sort of person is the sort of person who's going to be a good customer, and this one's the sort of person going to be a bad customer. So, you could just start to imagine what sorts of things we want to find out how the social credit scores work in China.
Well, I was going to ask, because in China, they're using cameras to be able to recognize a distinct person to person based on the gait of their walk. So if they can identify someone that jaywalks, for example. I hope I've got this. Do I have this correct?
Yeah.
Pull it up, Sam.
It's old tech. 20 years ago, we were talking about this.
Oh.
Get up to date, Joe.
No,
Jeez,
well,
mate.
is this newly implemented, or has China had this?
Well, I know people in Brisbane who are working on it 20 years ago.
Oh, wow. Is this something that's actually happening?
Yeah, gait recognition.
Get up to date. This was.
Yeah, I mean,
sort of
looking at your face. Face is old, but gait recognition was well, the way it was presented to me, there are some parts of the world where you can't see people's faces.
Right. So your particular religions and cultures.
Yeah, but I mean, same. You can't see their legs either. So the gait recognition is probably nowadays advanced more. We thought of gait as how you move your limbs. I'm sure there's a whole lot more of it that's going on now. Is that just how people sort of maybe shuffle? You can see, what they do, how they react to various sorts of things. Oh, yes, that's right. This is how so-and-so reacts when they walk past a green sign or a red sign or whatever. So gait recognition is something that's been a big deal for over 20 years, and you've got to be confident that they're way past it.
But what do you, from like I guess a more moral and ethical standpoint and your privacy, what do you think of, what sort of problems could something like that, if implemented, kind of pose?
Anything that people know about you, they can think of all sorts of things, make your life difficult in various ways if they want to. But I'm pretty sure. I mean, this sounds like classic conspiracy theory type thing. But I was just thinking about UFOs, for example.
Yes.
I
I was waiting for this.
Yeah,
I was waiting.
He actually said prior to
I love
this chat,
UFOs.
he wanted to talk about UFOs.
I was reading, once again, is that, look, I'm still a small boy who likes bombers and battleships. Okay, so reading the story of the Manhattan Project, is absolutely fascinating. I might add, I'm one of those people who thinks killing tens of thousands of people, bombing cities at one time, is actually a war crime. There is no way that can be morally justified. Okay, is that if we wanted to liberate Europe from the Nazis, or Japan from the militarists who were running the country in the 40s, there are a lot better ways to do it than by killing the women and children of Hamburg and the women and children of Hiroshima. Okay. But having said that, is that the technological effort in the Manhattan Project was absolutely breathtaking. We know that many of the Manhattan scientists thought that that bomb shouldn't have been used once they'd built it. Anyway, that's a moral issue for them to deal with in their makeup. But
Have you seen Oppenheimer?
yeah, Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
the rest of them. I mean, it's once you've done it, what do you think was going to happen? But anyway, don't get me wrong. I think the Nazis had to be stopped, but I don't think the women and children of Hamburg were the big threat. We actually know someone, by the way, who was in the firestorm at Hamburg. Do you know the de Groots?
Yes.
The recently deceased Liz de Groot. Her mother went into labour with her baby daughter during the firestorm, and 16-year-old Liz de Groot had to go and find a doctor to deliver the baby.
No way.
Yes, but anyway, no, everything is happening. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Is that she found this doctor, and he said, "Oh yes, okay, here's your new baby." And he says, "By the way," he says, "you really shouldn't be here in Hamburg. I've got a country house outside in the forest. Why don't you come and stay with me and my wife while your husband is away at the war doing whatever?" And so they spent another 2 years in the quiet with. Which they kind of deserved after having, entitled to after their horrible experience. But it's interesting that people you find who've been through nameless terrors is absolutely is breathtaking. We can go on and on. But anyway, nuclear fission was discovered in 1938. Okay, they didn't have it before then. And it had been weaponised by 1945. The Nagasaki bomb was, and the first one, the one they tested in the New Mexico desert, used plutonium. They didn't have plutonium until 1940, It's absolutely breathtaking. And it was all kept pretty much a secret. No one knew about it except the guys sending information back to Moscow because they were communists. But we didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, there's an atomic bomb, 1945. Wow, where did that come from? We didn't know. Oh, no, those huge factories that we built, the bomber bases, all done in plain sight. No one knew what was going on. Well, it's a good thing that sort of thing's over and that we don't have those sort of secret projects that no one knows about going on.
Oh.
And you say, well, hang on, is that they were able to do that in the 40s, and it's 80 years since. The chances that someone has been able to replicate something of the scale of the Manhattan Project has got to be non-zero. So, who knows what stuff is lurking out there. And it's really kind of remarkable that we haven't seen violence of that scale, spectacular violence of cities being destroyed in an instant since 1945. So you wonder what on earth has been happening since then. Because the forces that were at work that made people think they had to destroy cities in 1945, I don't know if people have become any better since then. I mean, the sorts of people who, maybe they think they're doing their duty. Okay, let's say that. They think they've got a sense of duty and, they think they've got to, invade Poland. I mean, there were people who in the German army thought it was their duty to invade Poland. Just like the people in the RAF thought it was their duty to bomb Hamburg. They're not quite equivalent, but nevertheless they're things that shouldn't happen. And likewise in Asia Pacific, similar sorts of things. The forces that make people do those sorts of things, don't think they've gone away. So what people are spending their time doing.
I think people are opening their eyes a bit more nowadays to that sort of stuff. Like, for example, I feel like in the past, if you ever were to talk about some sort of secret government project behind the scenes, you'd be called a conspiracy theorist straight away. Whereas now, I think people are starting to sort of go, well, yeah, there definitely probably is something going on. And I found out recently that actually the term conspiracy theorist was coined by the American government back in to disprove when the whole JFK assassination went down. So to sort of have this sticker term to discredit anyone that was sort of rebutted against it. And I found that really interesting because, of course.
But, I mean, there are conspiracies and conspiracies.
Yeah.
Is that there are sort of without sort of naming names, I mean, there are some conspiracy theories that sort of get personally nasty. There are other, and I wouldn't even say, I think, talking about conspiracy, the idea that there is a conspiracy is, don't think you even have to use the word conspiracy, is that, it's just a secret government project. And in some sense, it's perfectly legitimate. Is that, you can say, but decent people will get caught up in it because, I know, it's defending the nation and defending freedom. I don't know. But once again, is that the fact that we had in our recent history the Manhattan Project, which has got all sorts of fascinating attributes of, wonder weapons and weapons of mass destruction, completely hidden from the public. The idea that something even sort of less threatening, but even sort of more marvellous, couldn't have been done is kind of saying, well, surely all of the ways that we developed during the Manhattan Project to do things, we could do something spectacular like that again. And then the people who keep seeing UFOs, for example, is that I think you've got to be, evidence-based. If people are seeing stuff, then there's stuff. So, it doesn't have to be spacemen. It easily could be hypersonic, scramjet-powered vehicles, electromagnetic stuff, all sorts of whatever tech that we only have got a faint clue about.
Well, how about those drones that they were flying over New Jersey?
Yes,
and
that's
then
right, yeah.
The government come out weeks later and said, "Oh, they're ours." But up until that point, they could have been eventually.
Okay.
And up until that point, they could have been anything. There were these car-sized drones. They were staying up for about 6 hours, and people just seen them. People had videos of them, and no one was claiming. And then the American government came out and said, "Oh, these are things we've been working on." What I heard through the grapevine and all my trusted sources was that they could have been looking for weapons they lost, and some using some sort of gamma radiation. I'm not a scientist, so I won't try and articulate on that. But
no, but gamma rays are cool because they're the most energetic ones. So if you're going to have any kind of rays,
gamma
go for
rays
the gamma rays.
I love that.
Yeah, it's funny how it seems that it's all the deep south people that's have the sightings of the things.
Well, my dad and I, we use proper English. We travel the country together every week, and my dad is really into UFOs. Because he's convinced he saw one, because he used to do tours from Alice Springs out to the Kimberley, swag tours back in the 90s. And so you'd be sitting under the stars and you see everything. And he's convinced that he saw one. I think he knows deep down that it probably might have been something else, but he loves UFOs. He spends all his time reading about them, watching YouTube videos. And we spent every night on the balcony when we were away, having a couple drinks and looking at the sky. And we saw the Starlink.
Oh, how cool is
the Starlink
that?
satellites. Yeah. And if you didn't know what Starlink was, you would dead set think this is a UFO. It's like 10, we thought it was stars, like 10 stars, and like perfectly in unison, they just come right over you.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what it was before we looked it up. And we just looked at each other like...
I had the exact same experience with Tom, because we were out for a jog, probably, it was like a year ago now, but neither of us had heard of Starlink.
Yeah.
And it was like 5 a.m. and it was winter, so pitch black. And we looked up and we had the exact same thought. Just 10 stars with like, just in a sequence with, the same space between each one.
Yeah.
Following.
I just looked at it, I was like, you didn't put anything in that tobacco, did you?
Yeah.
I was like, because I did see that.
So look, I mean, the thing for us all, of course, is that we're at the mercy of forces, orders of magnitude more than anything we could control or resist. And once again, viewers, I'm not proposing anyone break the law or anything like that. Resistance is useless. But I mean, I think the only thing we can really got control of is ourselves, and the important thing is to exercise virtue. Is that not just for our own salvation, which is the number one end, but I mean, if you want to expect the big bosses to behave, they've got to somehow learn from us. And I don't know how you convince, if we're scared of the people running things, that they might be selfish. Okay, is that if the people with power decided to be selfish, then it would be bad news for us. So, I mean, the charitable thing to do is how do you describe people, how do we get people in power to be nice? Because if the people in power aren't going to be nice, then we've got no hope at all. Is that it was like, oh, you're tuning in for this, is that I remember Marcos, the president of the Philippines, there was a popular rebellion against him. And there were people demonstrating in Manila outside the presidential palace trying to overthrow him. He could have ordered the army to shoot them, but he said, no, I'm going to go into exile. Okay, so, you know, you for whatever reason, people in power don't use their power, but will subside. And, you know, we want people in power to make right decisions. There's, you know, it's easy to think of them, you know, just sort of, as it might implicitly have sounded the way I was talking before, say, oh no, we've got all these big shots who are going to be out to get us. Well, you know, I mean, you know, I'm a bad person, you know, I'm selfish and things, and they might be as bad as I am. So if we all want a happy life, we've somehow got to persuade them to be better than us. So I don't know, you know, naturally how you do that, but it's the only way to go. Is you can't get rid of your enemies. You've got to somehow, you know, love them to death.
Or at least the next generation of leaders are raised in a culture that is more, I guess, virtuous or benevolent.
Well, yes, correct. And, you know, I don't know we know we're raising our generation of leaders. I don't know what the next generation of leaders are all going to be like. Maybe not everybody has virtuous parents, but that really needs to be that really should be the project. For those of us who are, you know, it's where our next meal's coming from is not the big issue that it might have been once. What do you do? I think, you know, with the world of AI that we're all talking about and wonder weapons and the power gap between the people in charge and people like us is now distancing to such a fantastic degree. It's sort of meaningless. How do we get the people in charge to decide to be virtuous and to you know, make you know, for them heroic decisions to give up power and to make the world a better place? I know I'm sounding like Sandra Bullock, you know, world peace too, that sort of thing. But that's really what it's got to be like, because you know, I think there's no hope of defending ourselves by force against people in powerful positions who want to use force against us. And we say, what do you mean force? The conspiracy? No. I mean, it's the next world war that could break out any time. You never know what on earth's going to happen. You know, I'm actually kind of, you know, I'm one of those people who think one of Donald Trump's best assets is he's not Kamala or the rest of them. But, you know, is that it's not quite clear how what I'd call his confrontational approach is going to be received by the people he's confronting. Like, these people that he's confronting, I think, deserve to be confronted. But then the question is, but what are they going to do about it? Are they just going to sit back and crawl into their holes, or are they going to do something crazy in response? And, you know, people do that sort of thing. I think it's a good time for us all to be reading Barbara Tuchman's August 1914 about how World War I broke out. Europe was actually quite a, you know, relatively nice place in 1914.
Wasn't it all just a misunderstanding?
Well, I mean, it was a whole lot of stuff was really... but read the book. It's absolutely... You know, the 1939, Hitler was a good guy to go to war against because he was a very bad man. The Kaiser was nowhere in that sort of league. Even the Tsar of Russia. I mean, you know, they weren't genocidal maniacs who wanted to rule the world. They just want to rule their own country. And Germany in 1914 wasn't, you know, quite the total militaristic state. Everyone had to be in to do army service. But, you know, the Socialist Party which is not the militarist party, had a majority in the German Reichstag. They had a social benefits program, very 20th century. I'm not a socialist, but I'm just saying is that that Germany was looking like a pretty modern country in 1914. All the European countries were, we'd call them, on a path of progressiveness now. Not that I think progressiveness is an unalloyed virtue by any means, but it really wasn't a foreign world. There was a lot of stuff going on in 1914 in terms of politics and society that we recognise nowadays. But still, they all decided, let's all go and kill millions of people or get millions of people killed. Oh, there's actually the funny part, funny part, is that at some stage during the crisis, the German war plan was a two-part war plan. Defeat France, then defeat Russia. So they knew there'd be a war and that the French and Russians were on the other side. So we defeat France, then we defeat Russia, because the Russians are going to be slow to mobilise. And we defeated the French in 1870 and we'll do it again in 19 wherever. Okay, easy. So during the crisis, the Kaiser said, look, supposedly you said, do we really have to go after the French? If we just have an attack on the Russians, we can just beat them. We don't have to have a complete war in Western Europe. And he was told basically, well, no, we don't have the software for that. They didn't use exactly those words, but the German mobilisation plan was very intricate for moving millions or hundreds of thousands of soldiers around Germany. And the key thing were the railway timetables. They had massive troop trains that were meant to leave cities and that all converge on the French frontier, where they'd, in the middle of the forest, built railway platforms a mile long for all the troops to detrain. And they had everything in the German style of things worked out in minute detail. And well, what about if we just all go to Russia? We don't have the railway timetables for that. It was literally a software problem that said, no, sorry, we don't have any choice. If there's going to be a war, we got to invade France, because that's the only thing we know how to do.
Wow.
So yes, and just while I'm showing off, is that, do you know where the British Empire fired its first shot in World War One? Did I tell you last time? No.
No.
When do you reckon? War broke out at midnight, August the 4th, 1914, GMT, war between Britain and Germany. So where did the British Empire fire its first shot?
Poland.
Poland, bit a long way from home.
Yeah.
Was it in England?
No. I mean, no, that would have been a bit of a failure, the Germans being in England.
Oh, sorry. Whereabouts? So Germany got England.
The Mornington Peninsula.
In Melbourne?
Yes.
Wait.
What?
No.
Yes. Is that Australia, being a country that emphasised defence preparedness, one of the things you did back in those days was near every port you'd install coastal artillery. That is cannons, you might call them. And the western tip of Mornington Peninsula and the eastern tip of the other one on the other side of Port Phillip Bay each had a battery of 2 6-inch naval guns. And on the morning of sometime during the day of the 5th of August 1914 in Australia, German ship got word of the outbreak of war, and it was a cargo boat in delivering stuff in Melbourne. So they upped anchor and headed out through the heads at full speed. Meanwhile, the telegraph signal had come in from London to the Australian military that we were all at war with Germany, and the signal went down to the battery to stand to the guns, and they fired a warning shot or two at the German ship, and it stopped and was captured.
I'm going to Mornington next Thursday.
Yeah. Now here's another way for this. Where did the British Empire fire its first shot in World War II?
Is it in Australia again?
Well, you had to listen very carefully to. I set you up for this. I said the battery at the Morning Peninsula had 2 6-inch guns. It was the other gun under the same circumstances.
And nothing's happened in Mornington since.
Except that there was a fine commemoration on August the 4th, 2014, or sorry, August, was it the 5th maybe, at Mornington Peninsula. Our friend, the Major, Bernard Gaynor Senior, organised a centenarial commemoration of the first shot. It was very well attended. We happened to be there for the occasion. It was quite exciting.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but the reason I bring this up is that, when things were going on in Ukraine, I was saying, at least it's a long way, and I said, no, it's not. Is that from 1914, 110 years ago, over 110 years ago, is that war was global. Is that, Australia was shooting here on the ground in Australia and in the water from the very first hours. So there's
fast forward 100 years.
There's no escape from anything anymore. So, if things go south in Kiev, then who knows where that's going to manifest itself.
Well, Professor, this is generally the part of the show where I ask, where can people find you? But I'm not sure you exactly would like that. But is there
addresses
any
are fine.
But in terms of like social media, books, or I guess do we just have the honor of having?
Well, is that the Google's a wonderful thing, but no, look, I think my mate. My old mate Joe and my new mate Lou would be. I'm sure anyone who desperate to share an opinion can share it in your venue. I just want to emphasise is that I don't have any malice towards anybody, even the oligarchs who've got infinity money. Is that I just hope and pray that. One day we'll be able to demonstrate to them that the world is a more valuable place with people like us in it, and that the more people like us there are, then the more the merrier is what I would say. So we'll look forward to helping make them happy just by virtue of our sharing the world with them.
Professor Bales, thank you so much.
Not at all.